And welcome everybody to another Smart Money Circle show. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Tom Logan, who's the founder and CEO of Mirion. Ticker symbol is MIR. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm very excited about today's show.
Adam, it's a sincere pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. So, Tom, I always like to begin. Can you tell us your story and how you got to where you are today, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. My story is probably a little bit atypical and probably a little bit circuitous, but I did my education at Cornell, undergrad and MBA, and as I left Cornell, I moved out to San Francisco and began my career with Chevron. Large, obviously, one of the leading global oil producers. Yeah, it was a great experience for me. Very strong opportunity to see the world. I had expatriate assignments in the UK and in Kazakhstan. Did a lot of things that really helped me to understand and really create kind of a framework as to my particular view of the world, at least in terms of how business should be conducted. And that was informed in part by both positive experiences there as well as negative experiences there. I left Chevron and joined a privately owned, family-owned enterprise that was focused principally in the food industry. Ultimately becoming CFO of one of their food ingredient businesses and also president of a cogeneration business they had, where they ran a small power plant in the Central Valley of California. Exited both businesses, selling them to the food business, to a major food ingredient or packaged food producer, the power plant to a major independent power producer. And at that point, I joined my first private equity-backed company, which was a roll-up of contract manufacturing of businesses. I joined as CFO, a very operational CFO. And that was a business that was focused largely on the global tech community, and the timing was perfect in that I joined the company right as we went through the dot-com collapse, and it led to a very stressful couple of years as we figured out how to deal with essentially a demand equation that had collapsed, and ultimately to gain the maximum possible value for the business, which ultimately we did. We ended up taking the company through Chapter 11, selling it out of Chapter 11, but in many respects, it was a successful failure and something that was an enormously useful learning experience for me overall. But on the heels of a couple of good exits for me personally, I decided to take a swing at the startup world and was involved for a period of a couple of years with three different early stage companies in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is my primary domicile. And again, tremendous learning experience. Did a lot of things. Had the opportunity to really think creatively and generate some IP, particularly in the financial world, relating to financial trade credit disintermediation and just kind of the evolving payment space overall. And then randomly, I was approached by one of the top tier recruiters to enter into a dialogue with a financial sponsor that was interested in rolling up three very different small companies into a more unified play that could gain them in a fairly rapid fashion a scale multiple expansion. And it was really playing off what at the time was a lot of talk about a nuclear renaissance. And this had been spurred on principally by the sale of Westinghouse, the leading reactor designer in the world, from the British government to Toshiba, which sold at a record multiple, and it was, again, just emblematic of a very frothy environment overall. And the hook for me is that they offered me a seat on the Piper aircraft board. I'm a lifelong pilot. To me, that was particularly intriguing. So I agreed to do it. And shortly thereafter, Mirion was born. We worked very hard to integrate these three initial companies and get them into a position where, again, we could do a relatively quick exit. But as we thought about it, as we learned the market and as the macro picture evolved, ultimately we concluded that there was more value to be gained by doing a deeper integration, fundamentally reorienting the strategic vectors that we were focused on, and ultimately what was intended to be kind of a quick 3-year round trip turned into my life's work. This is I'm now on my 21st year
I love it.
at Mirion, and it's been an incredible adventure. We've built I think a great company. I have great affection for the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And I think what we're doing is truly making the world a better place. And by the way, we've also created a lot of value. Our first sponsor got nearly a 7x cash on cash return, which by private equity standards is pretty good. Our
Wow.
second sponsor was better than 2.5, and I think the metric, Adam, I reserve on this a little bit, is that if you had invested $1 in Mirion back in 2003, it would be worth more than $21 today.
Nice.
We can talk more later about the kind of environment that we've had to deal with through much of that history, but fundamentally, that's my story, and in many respects, I feel like we're just hitting our stride, and I can't wait to see what we do over the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh, I absolutely love it. That's a phenomenal story. So let's talk about the company, please, Mirion, what exactly you do, and then some of your competitive advantages, please.
So Mirion is the global leader in ionizing radiation detection and measurement. And I know that strikes people on first hearing as being very esoteric and very technically complex field. In some respects, it is. But the starting point is to note that the overall addressable market that we're playing in is about an 18 or $19 billion addressable market. It's huge. And our currently served market, where we are playing today, is about $4 billion. To parse the components to a little bit, firstly, when we talk about ionizing radiation, we are talking about radiation that can knock an electron out of its orbit, or maybe on a more relatable fashion, it can cause tissue damage in human beings. We're not talking about microwave. We are talking about alpha, beta, gamma, X-ray, and neutron radiation. And we make instruments and provide software solutions and highly tech-enabled services that allow for, again, the detection, the measurement, the analysis, and ultimately the harnessing of this energy for beneficial purposes. So that's kind of who we are in a nutshell. We are the global leader by far. We're number one in 17 of 19 product categories on a global basis. We are by far the largest player in this space that we have defined. Our largest competitors are Thermo Fisher, Ametek, and Fortive, and we are on a like-for-like basis many times larger than any of those individual competitors. And it's a great space, has tremendous dynamics. And again, I'm happy to unpack those deeper in the conversation, but that's essentially who we are.
I love that. So basically, for the audience, there's radiation that comes out from nuclear power plants or from heavy-duty medical devices, things of that nature, that could hurt people or could damage tissue. So what you do is you ionize the radiation, so you help reduce the harmful effects from that radiation as it's emitted. Is that correct? I don't want to overstep.
Yeah, let me reorient that just a little bit. Firstly, ionizing radiation is everywhere. It comes from the ground. It comes from your body emits ionizing radiation. It comes from extraterrestrial sources, but it also comes from man-made sources like commercial nuclear power, medical applications, defense applications, and other things. And our capability set really is to be able to detect with incredible sophistication in any of those vertical markets this type of radiation. Let me put some flesh on that bone overall. One of the areas that we don't tend to highlight enough, simply because it's not a huge component of our overall revenue mix, is the work that we do in the big science community. And some of the talking points that engender enormous pride internally at Mirion would include the fact that our instrumentation was used for the discovery of the last 9 elements on the periodic table. We have been on most significant interplanetary space probes. Our instruments literally confirm the presence of water on Mars. We recently launched on the European Space Agency Jupiter mission. We're involved with the Artemis project for the Mars mission and the next moon mission with NASA. We're on the International Space Station. We are deeply, deeply involved with the global space community, but we're also at the opposite end of the spectrum, really the go-to firm for the kind of instrumentation that's used to better understand dark matter and subparticle physics. And so our technological capabilities are second to none. Our innovation, experience, and record is second to none. And the important thing, maybe the coolest thing about our business, is that the things that we learn in those big science applications have immediate and direct relevance in commercial nuclear power, in cancer care, medical treatment writ large, in the life sciences space, in the defense space. And we have a very strong track record of taking innovation out of that science lab, particularly as it relates to detector design, material science, signal chain management, software applications that support all of that, and figuring out how to repurpose them into commercially viable form factors and producing them at industrial scale. And that's really the magic behind Mirion, because fundamentally what that allows us to do is to grow within this rather large total addressable market without ever having to be a conglomerate. You know, most of the great industrial tech firms, and even some of the hybrid industrial tech and med tech firms, which is more what we are, ultimately end up conglomerating. They buy companies and enter into markets that really have no connection with their historical presence, and they really make their living by being great operators, by being very sophisticated financially. But again, the great thing about Mirion is that we have the ability to grow within this enormous TAM without ever having to conglomerate, and continuing to apply that fundamental technological leverage that really drives our ecosystem today.
No, that makes perfect sense. So I'm curious here for a second, because you mentioned roll-ups. Let's go back to your story for a second. PE roll-ups, you started off with Chevron, then you moved over and you did many other things. What initially attracted you to this space? Did you see problem / solution, or was there other motivating factors? Because I love the mission, and I love what you're doing here. And as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I have family, my father-in-law, and my wife, when she first started, when I first met her, came from the nuclear industry. So I understand the problem and the TAM and the medical device side of it too. The radiation itself is just a massive thing. How did you get drawn to that? And how did you figure out that you wanted to help solve this problem and create this business?
Yeah, the way I got drawn in, Adam, is that firstly, when presented the initial opportunity, again, for this, kind of quick transactional flip that really formed the kernel of Mirion, I absolutely was a believer in the importance of nuclear power. And at the time, I should note that the business in its original incarnation had about 70 to 75% exposure. In other words, 70 to 75% of the total revenues ultimately came from commercial power. Today, that number is about 35%. But I was a true believer that the world had to emphasize nuclear energy to a greater degree. And clearly, in the 20 years that's passed, there have been a lot of bumps in the road. But today, I think that sentiment is shared more strongly than ever. But that was the initial hook, is that I thought, this is a crucial component of the solution to decarbonizing the global economy, ensuring energy security across the globe. And I think more and more people share that view today than probably we've seen since the 1970s.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I love that visionary component too. Think about the actual footprint. Are you globally operating? Do you have revenue from all over? Are you more centered in the US, or how does that mix come into play?
No, and in fact, the majority of our revenues are from outside of the US. We're a very global enterprise. Today, we have about 2,700 employees globally, 21 factories, again, across the globe. And principally, we are in Europe and in the US. We do have a number of facilities in China, in Japan, and elsewhere in the world. But it's a very, very international organization, and tied to the markets, which in turn obviously are very international in scope.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much, Tom, for that overview. And the people can learn more by going to your website for investor relations. It's Mirion.com, and then click on the investors tab. Is that correct? For those that want
That's
to dive
correct.
Okay, beautiful. So next few questions I have for you. Let's talk about risk management. These are more timeless in nature. How do you handle risk, and what mistakes do you see people make with respect to risk management?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things in my background that I think have been particularly useful to me in thinking about risk. Firstly, as somebody that came up through the various financial roles in my formative years, where amongst other things, when I was in London, I was managing hundreds of millions of dollars of liquidity portfolios and foreign exchange exposures and things like that. And you learn to be very, very cognizant about different elements of risk, that are driven by large scale macroeconomic factors. And it also forces you to quickly become very decisive. You learn very early on as a portfolio manager running different multi-currency portfolios, that when an arbitrage opportunity comes up, you have to be prepared to act on it instantaneously. You can't wait 30 seconds to pull out your calculator. You have to go. And that decisiveness and that risk awareness has served me well throughout my career. But another very important, I guess, early experience for me, again, starting my career at Chevron, was to understand how careers are made at large companies. That great careers at large companies are essentially a war of attrition. Any of the leading academy companies have incredible talent benches. They're deep, they're broad, and they're very, very good at onboarding fresh new talent. And people quickly realize that to thrive and prosper in my career, I can anticipate that I'm going to be in any new job for about 3 years, give or take. And my job is to make things a little bit better incrementally, to be very politically aware and very well networked. Essentially to build my brand, to build my relationship capital within the enterprise, and to not make a mistake. And if you can do that consistently, then your competitors over time blow themselves up. Either they make a mistake,
Right.
or they leave the enterprise and go elsewhere. And essentially, the people who win are the last men and women standing. But part of that, and this is again kind of a crucial philosophical pillar for Mirion, given the people that we compete against, is that part of that really forces people to think in a very linear fashion, a very incremental fashion. And of course, this isn't true at every large company. This is a generalism, I'm not calling out specific companies here. But we learned early on that if we can embrace risk in a systematic fashion, and understand what risks are we prepared to take, what risks are we not prepared to take, then we can take a longer term view.
Yeah.
And we can embrace risks that we know our larger competitors simply can't face because of those career building dynamics. And that, to be clear, Adam, has been a major factor in our track record, where we have systematically outgrown our markets. Not just for a couple of years, but for 20 years, and done so in tough markets and good markets. But part of that is, again, that we're very risk aware, and we know what risks we're prepared to embrace. And generally speaking, we are prepared to take on systematic strategic risks to a greater degree than some of the people that we compete against. And, that's been a real, again, critical element in our success.
Yeah, I absolutely love that systematic risk component, knowing what you're going to do and what you're not going to do before you even engage is because it helps eliminate all the bad or quote unquote lower quality decisions. So by definition, you're setting yourself up to win, because you're focusing on the best of the best, and then just making a decision within those predetermined decisions range. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, beautiful. Some timeless lessons, Tom, that you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience, please.
Timeless lessons. I mean, it's such a great topic, Adam, and it's one that we could talk about for the duration of the podcast. But as it relates to the business overall, and just acting as a leader in any kind of role overall. I will tell you the things that are most meaningful to me in terms of how you should manage a business would include these. Firstly, that I'm a huge believer in delegating power and authority as deeply and as broadly into the organization as possible. And that's something that's very hard to do. A lot of people will talk about, having a Federalist type governance structure and taking this approach. But if you are very disciplined about it to the point where you allow people to fail in a contained fashion, you're not kind of hovering over them like a helicopter parent, guarding them from making mistakes, you allow them to make mistakes. Ultimately, that creates an entrepreneurial dynamic, and it gives you the ability to manage an enterprise like this that does have a very far-flung geographic footprint, is involved in many different businesses, different verticals, et cetera, in a much more effective fashion than you ever could in more of a conventional command and control a basis overall. Every time I have strayed from that philosophy, I have lived to regret it. And so it is a bedrock principle within our company that we will do this. We will take a Federalist approach. We will have the flattest possible organization. We will delegate power deeply. And importantly, what has to happen to make that work is that you have to be eyes open about boundary level issues, and you have to be very explicit about who has the ball in every circumstance. I mentioned earlier that I'm a pilot, and one of the things that you learn early on in flight training is that there has to be clarity as to who is flying the airplane. When you're first a student pilot, you can feel your instructor coming onto the controls to nudge them in one direction or another. And you think, okay, he's flying the airplane or she's flying the airplane. I'm not really in charge. To the point where as you evolve up through jet type ratings and things like that, there's much more of an emphasis on crew resource management, where you're very, very clear that, Adam, if you and I were sitting up front on the flight deck of a jet, and I was handing over the controls to you, I'd say, Adam, you have the flight controls. And you would repeat, I have the flight controls. And then I would say one more time, you have the flight controls. And the reason for that is that it is clarifying, and this is a lesson learned in blood, it is clarifying that ambiguity is dangerous. And that if both of us think we're flying, or if neither of us thinks we're flying, then that's the recipe for disaster. And in a corporate setting, the same thing applies, that when you have boundary levels, either between operating groups or between corporate functions and operating groups, there has to be absolute clarity as to who has the ball, who is flying the airplane at any given time. And that is a critically, critically important lesson for any C-level executive, to make sure that the organizational or the organization overall is free of that ambiguity. Beyond that, the other timeless lessons would relate to leadership and vision and a whole host of other things. But in terms of, running a business, to me, I would start with those and then get into just the clarity as to what really matters and how you're establishing a clear-eyed vision, and how ultimately you're creating coherence from the C-suite down to the shop floor to make sure that everybody is aligned and everybody is focused on the things that matter most. Obviously, is a critically important a life lesson and I guess piece of wisdom that just works, and it always works.
Oh, this is absolutely wonderful. So I'm taking notes as you're speaking, and that clarity matters and ambiguity is dangerous is phenomenal. I love doing the show because I get nuggets of wisdom. Everyone's got a different flavor, and how you word things and how you process information, to me, is it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. I love that clarity matters and ambiguity is dangerous. Wow, that's fantastic. All right, next question for you. Timeless mistakes. What are some, and then how do you avoid them?
Yeah, the corporate world obviously is paved in mistakes that people would make, and some of the things that would be top of mind for me would be, firstly, failure to act. That oftentimes, maybe most of the time, leaders are dealing in environments that aren't perfectly clear. there is the fog of the battlefield that kind of masks what's the right way forward. And the way that some people deal with that is that they'll just analyze things to death. And rather than understanding when do I have enough information to act, their question is, do I have all of the information before I act? And failure to act probably is one of the most critical catalysts of failure for any business. That when the dynamic is changing, whether it's positive change or negative change, you have to understand it. You have to understand again when you have sufficient data to act, which is never 100% of the data. It's just enough, and then you have to move. I think a second important lesson or root cause of failure is lack of environmental analysis or understanding. And again, for me, one of the great advantages I had as a young stud puppy was working in that environment of managing liquidity portfolios and foreign exchange, where you have to really understand the tie between interest rates and exchange rates and global geopolitics and things like that. And I've been a student of geopolitical issues for my entire career. And one of the things that I experience continuously is that people don't lift their heads up, don't look at the horizon, don't understand well the macro factors that impact their business, because most people are just kind of heads down, trying to deal with what's right in front of them, what's in their pipeline, whether it's a commercial pipeline, a technical pipeline, a financial pipeline, whatever it happens to be. Most people are heads down, again, focused on what drives their immediate kind of task tyranny. And so I think it's very critical for people, again, to understand the environment, to lift their heads, to look at the horizon periodically, to step back and take a big picture view. And it's always a mistake when people don't understand that. I think the next thing on my list would be lack of financial knowledge. At the end of the day, leaders in any commercial enterprise are responsible for creating value. And this is not some ambiguous concept. Value in a commercial enterprise is driven by three things. It's increasing, your top line volume. It's expanding margins, and it's improving the velocity of your free cash flow. That's it. It's very quantitative. It's very clear. It's very objective. But many leaders don't have deep knowledge of finance in a way that's sufficient to understand this. It's in many respects like having English as a foreign language, where some people speak it fluently and perfectly, and others have a minimal vocabulary. And I think so it is with leaders, that understanding the financial implications of what you do is such an important and critical predicate for understanding how you create value. That I think that's a real and fairly pervasive shortcoming on the part of many leaders. Final thing I would say is just poor leadership, where in this world that we're in right now, where there is a perpetual war for talent and generational shifts in as we move from boomers and Gen X to millennials and Gen Z, there are profound generational shifts in terms of what people are expecting when they join a company. And it's often said that people don't leave companies because of they're not leaving bad companies, they're leaving bad managers. And so poor leadership is obviously a perennial source of mistakes. And we've all had bad bosses in our careers, and we all would know how to describe those in terms of things like being controlling, volatile, short-sighted, self-serving, inaccessible, not caring about them, all these things. And obviously that all of that's avoidable within some certain parameters. But that's I think a common root cause in many failures.
No, that's really wonderful. I love what you said about Just understand those three principles of creating value, increasing revenue, expanding margins, and improve the velocity of free cash flow. That's so powerful because without that, there's no business, or the business is not going to grow. It'll stagnate, and then if you're not growing, you die. So, okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. The failure to act, not having, you'll never have perfect knowledge is really, really good. Have enough knowledge to take action. That's really powerful. And leaders are responsible for creating value. Really some great, great advice. Thank you, Tom, so far. Next concept, next topic is leadership. What makes a great leader in your opinion? And from, I guess this will be more of the soft skills. Again, if you want to mention the hard skills as well, whatever, or in any direction you want to go.
Sure. Yeah, so to me, leadership really begins with clarity around mission, values, and vision. Mission is, what is our reason for being? Vision is where do we want to go? What mountain do we want to climb? Values are how we're going to conduct ourselves as we go there. I think these concepts are often viewed as being kind of bureaucratic, kind of Dilbert-esque parodies of the sincere importance of these things. But again, these are incredibly important components of dogma in any company. And I'll tell you, we use these all the time. We talk about them all the time. Mission, we're a very acquisitive company. We've done 16 acquisitions since 2016. That's a really important part of our story. But every acquisition that we look at, one of the key screening criteria is this consonant with our mission? Because we get shown things all the time, and you get bankers telling us all the time that, oh, you should think more broadly and think of yourselves as a test and measurement business. And I have a great vibration sensor business or gas detection business that I want to show you. And we'll always begin by comparing that with our mission. And we do use it as a lens, and it's got a true pragmatic purpose in focusing us on the things that matter. And again, the things that are consistent, consonant with our mission overall. Secondly, vision is critically important. We want to build a great company here. We're proud of what we've done to date, but we want to build a lasting, recognized company that is seen as a true leader in its space overall. And the vision is critical for that, because it is very clarifying to your team in terms of what it is we're trying to accomplish, what good looks like. And you can then take it and break it down into bite-sized pieces that says, here's how we get from here to there. This isn't just some ridiculous hyperbolic statement. This is real, and we can get there by taking these steps. And then finally, the values. One of the other things that I learned in my early days in large companies is that culture matters. Every enterprise, every business, every collection of human beings has a culture. And culture is a choice. It can be propagated the way the senior leaders want it to be propagated. And if you have a good culture, it is a free strategic weapon, a strategic tool that allows you to beat your competition, particularly if they have bad cultures. And when we talk about bad cultures, we're talking about companies that are, very political, bureaucratic, risk averse, slow moving. Whereas our culture is one about, being, kind of employee positive. Let's have a healthy sense of, self-deprecating sense of humor, if you will. Yeah. Let's be prepared to accept risk. Let's be free of politics. Let's be free of these types of constraints. And again, you can express all of that through values, and you can live those values if the leaders choose to propagate these. Again, this sounds trivial, but it's amazing how many organizations really don't take these things seriously. And again, this is stuff that we talk about all the time, and it's important for every leader, whether they're the CEO or a middle manager, to be able to express these things, reinforce these things, et cetera. The second key element is to build a team. Mm-hmm. Great leaders build great teams, and they do that in different ways. But having the talent on the field necessary to win is obviously critically important. And the key thing here again is being decisive, having a system, a process, a methodology to be able to identify emerging talent, to be able to identify a talent that needs help, that needs coaching and or redirection and some level of dialogue. and ultimately to make sure that through some combination and some array of processes, you're making sure that you have the best possible talent on the field. And again, this is seemingly obvious, but many people are too slow to react, or in some cases too quick to react, where they're not helping people that are, that will benefit from that help and ultimately will be great at what they do. The final element, in terms of how I think about leadership, is then taking those things and being able to inspire people, inspiring them by firstly making it clear, what matters the most, and then secondly, why achieving this is worthy. Thirdly, your personal connection, why you are critical in helping us achieve these things, but basically to inspire people that, hey, we're doing great things. Our mission ultimately is about harnessing our capabilities for the greater good of humanity. And people really believe in that, and they really are inspired by it. But to be clear, that's my style of leadership, and there's an infinite number of leadership styles that clearly are effective. Some leaders, have a reign of terror, but they build brilliant companies. That's certainly not the way we do things at Mirion, but that's how I think about leadership.
I love that. So it's funny you say that, because I have a book. I wrote a book about investing. It was #1 on Amazon for 2 months. And I talk about there's an infinite number of ways to make money in the market. Your job is to find one that works for you. So what you're saying here with the infinite number of ways to lead, I love that as well. Let's talk about adversity and some obstacles. How do you handle adversity, and what are some obstacles you had to overcome that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so the nature of leadership, again, at any level within the enterprise, is that you're going to face adversity, and seemingly constant adversity, because that's the nature of business. It is the ultimate kind of Darwinian environment, and bad things happen all the time, and so you have to be able to react to it. And the way that I personally handle it is, firstly, when it occurs, to not be surprised by it, and be able to react to it in a systematic and positive fashion. Again, this is I think at one point I'm going to write a book about lessons learned flying, piloting aircraft, and how ultimately that relates to business. But as an example, if you if you're having a bad day in an airplane, you have to be very level-headed and think systematically. Okay, and firstly, recognize immediately that I have a problem, and then secondly, systematically go about solving that problem. And so it is in business, where first thing to do is maintain a level head, and not overreact to it, because experience demonstrates that people do tend to overreact to adversity until they calm down a little bit. And so it's important to start there. Recognize that adversity oftentimes is not just impacting you; it's impacting your competitors, or an entire sector. And so it represents not only a threat to your business, but an opportunity. And so the key thing is to figure out, how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to mitigate this situation? And ultimately, can we turn it to our advantage in terms of being able to respond to it better than our competitors are? Some of which involves preparation and anticipating adversity. And some of it just relates to, the in the moment option set that you have to deal with. And beyond that, understanding that this takes a toll on you. It's a grind, and it creates enormous stress. And as you know, Adam, running your business, that as the key guy, it's on you 24/7, 365, and you think about your business all the time, and you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. And so you have to find a way of turning this into a marathon, and being able to deal with the occasional body blows and the stress that comes with it. Part of that is being spiritually grounded, and whatever whatever that means to you. It's being physically fit, so that you can be resilient and deal with these things as they come. And recognize that the more senior you are in an organization, the more eyes are going to be on you to see how you're reacting to it. And if the world is upended, if you're a steady hand on the tiller, then that's going to be enormously calming to the people that work for you and around you. And that's how I would approach adversity in general. The second part of your question relates to personal challenges, and here I'd probably cite two things that have been obstacles that I've had to overcome in my career. Firstly, I would tell you that I am naturally highly introverted, and I think the classical definition of introversion is that when you're around people, you feel like they are consuming energy rather than generating energy for you. The world is run by extroverts. The corporate world in particular is run by extroverts, and so ultimately, as I have learned how to be extroverted when I am fundamentally wired to be introverted, I think it's kind of like a superpower, because not only do I understand the extroverts, but I understand the introverts really well. And some of our greatest leaders, our best ideas come from introverts. And too often, if you're not sensitive to how these people are wired, their voices won't be heard, and their talents will not be leveraged to the greatest degree possible. But that would be number one for me, again, is that I'm an introvert in a world run by extroverts. Secondly, I would tell you that my background is in finance. I'm not an engineer, and I'm obviously running a hyper technical company. The advantage I have, though, is that I'm naturally kind of technically or technologically oriented. I was a bit of a motorhead as a kid. I've always been fascinated by vehicles and taking engines apart, putting them back together, and things like that. And despite being a finance guy, I hold over a dozen patents. I have more in the works. I push people to think in a very lateral and expansive fashion. A lot of people assume I'm an engineer by virtue of that, and then there are many occasions where I wish I had a little bit deeper technological understanding about certain things. But at the end of the day, in the seat that I hold today, I don't need that, and I have enough of it. The last challenge that I would cite that I have personally is that I am definitely ADD, where and this is something that I've had to deal with my entire life, which is a challenge when you're a student and you sit down for a lecture, and the minute the lecturer starts speaking, you're 1,000 miles away. But on the other hand, the things that you learn as somebody with that background is the ability to hyper focus, the ability to multitask in a way that many others can't. And again, I think weirdly, being a bit ADD as a CEO, again, is kind of a superpower that allows you to focus deeply on things that really matter at that moment, but otherwise to be able to keep a lot of balls in the air. So those are the things that I would say have been challenges for me personally.
All right, Tom, absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, I could spend an hour commenting on on what you just said, the spiritual stuff, the stay grounded stuff, the superpower stuff. So in my book, I literally have cartoons, and I'll share them for 1 second. And the idea is to bring out your superhero inside of you, and then beat the.
That is awesome.
Yeah, thanks. So I've got two characters. One's a smart money superhero, and then the other one's a dumb money beast. And the idea is to make rational, not emotional decisions, which is exactly what you're saying. Stay grounded. And then ready when the body blows come, every garden has weeds. You just got to take the weeds out. Weeds are coming. So, but you can still have a beautiful garden. So I absolutely, next level. What very well.
Amen, brother. I'm right there with you.
100%. Okay. Final question for you. What's the best piece of advice you'd like to give to the audience or share with your 30-year-old self, please?
The best advice I would give, I'll address this to my 30-year-old self is maybe three things. Number one is work hard, be good at what you do. That's obviously obvious advice. Secondly, I would say have an agenda. Too many people will come in and even in a more humble job, you should have an agenda. You should have a point of view. You should have a worldview that informs the way you think about your job, understand how your job is connected to, whatever the overarching mission of your organization happens to be. And you should have an agenda focused on, here's what I want to do while I am in this role. Here is here are my personal set of visions and values and mission while I'm in this position. And too many people don't have an agenda. They just come in and they wait to be told, here's what you need to do. Here's what good looks like. And even if you are told all those things, you should still, have a countervailing point of view as to, how would I think about this organically? What should my agenda be? The final thing I would say is to be kind. The world is a small place. The business world is a smaller place, and any specific industry is a smaller place still. Being kind to everybody that you interact with costs you nothing. It makes everybody feel better about the way that they interact with you, the way that they feel about themselves. It gives people the ability to take off their armor and to think not about how do I protect myself from what may be an unpleasant or hostile interaction, to one where I can think about how can I be my best self? How can I play offense instead of defense? And kindness is really the most fundamental prerequisite to that. Understanding that kindness is a reflection that you care about people, that you want the best for them, and you're not in this just for yourself. And too often, again, particularly as young, ambitious people, we don't think about these things overall. So those would probably be the most important elements. I guess maybe the final thing too would be don't live for the future. Smell the roses, take your victories as they come, as you take your lumps. But try and be present, and appreciate life as a journey. You never get to the end until the end comes to you. And it's important to keep growing, keep looking forward, but also try and smell the roses along the way and be present. Don't live for a future state that may or may not come, and if it does come, may not be what you think it will be.
I love that. Have the internal scorecard instead of the external, and be, yeah, I love that. Absolutely fantastic. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been absolutely a pleasure, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Adam, thank you very much for inviting me. Have a great day.